Aaliyah Carter stepped out of her family's old sedan on her first day at Maplewood High School. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass. She took a deep breath, clutching her backpack tightly as she looked up at the sprawling brick building before her. It wasn't just any school, it was the school everyone in town talked about. Aaliyah had heard stories, how competitive it was, how close-knit the students were, and how hard it could be to fit in if you weren't one of them. She glanced down at her outfit, jeans, a simple sweater, and sneakers, and tugged nervously at one of her braids. Her mom had spent hours styling her hair that morning, weaving intricate patterns into each braid. To Aaliyah, they were beautiful, a piece of her identity she carried proudly wherever she went. But as she walked toward the entrance, she couldn't help but notice the curious stares from other students. Some whispered behind their hands, others openly gawked. Aaliyah tried to ignore it, reminding herself that this always happened when she arrived somewhere new. People would get used to her eventually, right? Inside, the hallways buzzed with energy. Students laughed, hugged, and caught up after summer break, their excitement filling the space like music. Aaliyah felt out of place amidst all the familiarity. She clutched her schedule tighter, searching for her homeroom. As she turned a corner, someone bumped into her, sending her books tumbling to the floor. "Oh, sorry," a girl said sarcastically, rolling her eyes as she strutted past with her friends. They giggled loudly, clearly amused by Aaliyah's clumsiness, or maybe it was something else entirely. Aaliyah bent down to pick up her things, her cheeks burning. She hated feeling so vulnerable, especially on her very first day, but she forced herself to smile, telling herself it was just nerves and nothing more. When she finally found her homeroom, she slid into an empty seat near the back, hoping to stay invisible. The teacher introduced himself as Mr. Peterson, a kind man with glasses perched on his nose. He greeted the class warmly and asked everyone to share a fun fact about themselves. One by one, students stood up, talking about vacations, sports teams, or quirky hobbies. When it was Aaliyah's turn, she hesitated. Then, gathering her courage, she stood and said softly, "I'm Aaliyah, and I love reading fantasy novels." The room fell silent for a moment. Finally, someone muttered under their breath, "Fantasy, what's that supposed to mean?" A few kids snickered, and Aaliyah quickly sat back down, wishing she could disappear. Why did everything feel so awkward? Was it because of her accent? Or was it the way she dressed? Maybe it was both, or maybe it was none of those things at all. Whatever it was, she resolved to keep her head down and focus on getting through the day. Gym class came next, and Aaliyah groaned inwardly. Physical education had never been her strong suit, and today was no exception. The coach divided the class into teams for dodgeball, and Aaliyah ended up on a team with only two other players who seemed equally unenthused. As the game began, balls flew across the court, and chaos erupted. Aaliyah dodged one, then another, until finally, a ball smacked her squarely in the arm. She winced, stepping off the court as instructed. That's when Derek Malone appeared. Known around school simply as Tank, Derek was impossible to miss. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with an intimidating swagger. His reputation preceded him. He was the guy everyone either feared or avoided. Today he sauntered over to where Aaliyah stood, leaning casually against the wall. "Hey, new girl," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "What's with the hair? Trying to start a trend?" Aaliyah blinked, unsure how to respond. She instinctively reached up to touch one of her braids, self-consciousness creeping in. Before she could say anything, Derek grabbed hold of one of the braids, giving it a sharp tug. Pain shot through her scalp and she gasped, pulling away. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Leave me alone," she managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. Derek smirked, clearly enjoying her discomfort. "Or what? You gonna cry to the principal?" Thankfully, the gym teacher blew the whistle just then, signaling the end of class. Derek released her braid and walked away, laughing with his buddies. Aaliyah stood frozen for a moment, heart pounding. She wanted to scream, to run after him and demand an apology, but she didn't. Instead, she gathered her belongings and headed to the locker room, trying to steady her breathing. This wasn't how her first day was supposed to go. As she changed, back into her regular clothes, Aaliyah replayed the incident in her mind. Why had Derek targeted her? Was it because of her hair? Her accent? Or was it simply because she was new? She shook her head, refusing to dwell on it. Tomorrow would be better, she told herself firmly. Things always got easier once people got to know you. But deep down, Aaliyah wasn't so sure. Over the next week, Sam and Aaliyah worked together like a well-oiled machine. They didn't talk much about their plan in public, just quick exchanges in the library or quiet whispers during lunch. But their determination was unwavering. Sam had always been observant, and now he used that skill to his advantage. He carried his phone everywhere, keeping it tucked discreetly in his pocket or hidden behind a textbook whenever Derek came into view. Aaliyah played her part too, staying calm and composed even when Derek's taunts grew louder and more frequent. The first opportunity came sooner than expected. One morning, as Aaliyah stood at her locker swapping out books, Derek appeared with his usual swagger. "Hey, Braids," he called out, loud enough for nearby students to hear. "Still trying to impress anyone with that hair? Or are you just hoping it'll scare people away?" A few kids snickered, but most kept walking, unwilling to get involved. Aaliyah clenched her jaw, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. She focused on organizing her books, pretending he wasn't there. But Derek wasn't done. He leaned closer, reaching out to tug at one of her braids again. This time, though, something was different. From across the hallway, Sam stepped forward, his phone already recording. "Leave her alone, Derek," Sam said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise of the crowded corridor. Students turned to look, surprised by the sudden confrontation. Derek froze mid-motion, his hand still hovering near Aaliyah's hair. For a moment, no one spoke. "What did you just say to me?" Derek growled, turning to face Sam. His tone was dangerous, laced with anger and disbelief. It was clear he hadn't expected anyone to challenge him. "Not here, not now." "I said leave her alone," Sam repeated, standing his ground. Though he wasn't particularly tall or muscular, there was a quiet strength in his posture, a resolve that made him impossible to ignore. "You think bullying someone makes you tough? Newsflash, it doesn't, it just makes you pathetic." Derek's face flushed red, embarrassment mixing with fury. "Who asked you, nerd?" he snapped, taking a step toward Sam. The crowd around them grew larger, students whispering excitedly as they watched the scene unfold. Some cheered quietly for Sam, while others braced themselves for a fight. But Sam didn't back down. Instead, he held up his phone, showing Derek the screen. "I've been recording everything," he said evenly. "Every insult, every shove, every little thing you've done to Aaliyah. You want me to play it for everyone right now? Or maybe I should send it straight to the principal." For a moment, Derek looked stunned. Then his expression shifted from shock to anger, his fists clenching at his sides. "You wouldn't dare," he spat, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Try me," Sam shot back, his tone icy. "Because trust me, Derek, if you keep this up, you'll regret it." The tension in the hallway was palpable, thick, enough to cut with a knife. Derek stared at Sam, searching for weakness but found none. Finally, with a muttered curse, he turned and stormed off, shoving past a group of freshmen who scrambled to get out of his way. The crowd erupted into murmurs, some applauding Sam under their breath while others speculated about what would happen next. As soon as Derek was gone, Aaliyah let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That was incredible," she said softly, looking at Sam with wide eyes. "Thank you," Sam shrugged, tucking his phone back into his pocket. "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "We're not done. We need to make sure the school takes this seriously." Later, that day after classes ended, Sam and Aaliyah met in the library to review the footage. Sitting side by side at a table in the far corner, they went through each clip carefully, making notes about dates, times, and specific incidents. Watching the videos was difficult for Aaliyah. Seeing Derek's smug grin and hearing his cruel words replayed over and over brought back all the emotions she'd tried so hard to suppress. But having Sam beside her made it easier. His steady presence reminded her why they were doing this, not just for revenge, but for justice. By the end of the evening, they had compiled a detailed report, complete with timestamps and descriptions of each incident. Sam printed out copies and slipped them into a folder, along with screenshots of the most damning moments from the recordings. "This is solid," he said, tapping the folder confidently. "There's no way they can ignore this." The next morning, they headed straight to the principal's office. Mrs. Peterson, the school's longtime administrator, greeted them with a polite smile. "What can I do for you two today?" she asked, gesturing for them to sit. Sam handed her the folder without hesitation. "We wanted to bring something important to your attention," he began, his voice calm but firm. "Aaliyah has been dealing with consistent harassment from another student, and we have evidence to prove it." Mrs. Peterson's smile faltered slightly as she opened the folder and began flipping through the pages. Her expression grew increasingly serious as she read the notes and examined the screenshots. When she finally looked up, her eyes were sharp and focused. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," she said gravely. "I'll review everything thoroughly and take appropriate action." Though her response was measured, Aaliyah felt a surge of relief. For weeks, she'd felt powerless, like nothing she said or did mattered. But now, sitting across from the principal with undeniable proof in hand, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things really could change. Word of what happened spread quickly through the school. By lunchtime, rumors were flying about Sam confronting Derek in the hallway and the mysterious folder he'd handed to the principal. Some students praised Sam for standing up to Derek, calling him brave and admirable. Others dismissed the whole thing as drama, predicting that nothing would come of it. Either way, the atmosphere felt different, charged with anticipation, as though everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Derek, meanwhile, seemed to sense that trouble was coming. He avoided Aaliyah and Sam for the rest of the day, sticking close to his friends and glaring at anyone who dared to meet his gaze. But even he couldn't escape the inevitable. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Peterson summoned him to her office. "Wendy?" Derek returned to class. His usual cockiness was noticeably absent. He slouched in his seat, avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked his way. Whatever Mrs. Peterson had said to him, it clearly had an impact. That evening, as Aaliyah walked home, she allowed herself a small smile. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. She knew that better than anyone. But for the first time in weeks, she felt like she wasn't fighting alone. And sometimes that made all the difference. The days that followed were a blur for Aaliyah. Each morning she woke up hoping things would improve, but they only seemed to get worse. Derek's taunts became a regular part of her routine, like an unwelcome shadow that followed her everywhere. In the crowded hallways between classes, he'd bump into her accidentally, sending her books flying. At lunch, he'd sit with his friends at a nearby table, making loud jokes about her hair or the way she spoke. Other students either laughed along nervously or pretended not to notice, burying their faces in their phones or turning away. Aaliyah tried to brush it off, reminding herself that high school was temporary and that she didn't need validation from people like Derek. But the constant harassment wore on her. She found herself dreading the walk to school each morning. The sound of the bell signaling the start of another day filled with tension. Even her favorite subjects, English literature and art, lost some of their charm when she felt eyes boring into her back during class discussions. The once vivid colors of her imagination began to fade under the weight of Derek's cruelty. Her parents noticed the change almost immediately. At dinner one evening, her mom asked gently, "How's school?" "Going, sweetheart? You seem quieter than usual." Aaliyah forced a smile, shrugging as she picked at her food. "It's fine," she lied. "Just adjusting, you know." Her dad raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but he didn't push further. Instead, he offered words of encouragement. "You're strong, Aaliyah. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself." Despite their support, Aaliyah felt alone. She didn't want to burden her parents with details about Derek's bullying. They worked hard enough already. Besides, what could they do? They weren't there to see how relentless he was, how every snide comment chipped away at her confidence. and reporting him to the school administration felt like an impossible option. What if Derek retaliated? What if no one believed her? One afternoon, as Aaliyah sat alone on a bench outside the cafeteria, flipping through the pages of her favorite novel, she sensed someone watching her. Looking up, she saw Sam Whitaker standing a few feet away, holding a stack of textbooks. Sam was a senior, known around school for his intelligence and quirky personality. He wasn't exactly popular, but he wasn't invisible either. His curly, brown hair always looked like it hadn't seen a comb in days, and his mismatched socks were the subject of occasional teasing. Still, most people respected him because of his academic achievements. He'd won science fairs and coding competitions, earning accolades that made even the jocks pause before mocking him. Sam hesitated for a moment, then approached cautiously. "Hey," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Mind if I sit here?" Aaliyah blinked, surprised. She nodded, shifting slightly to give him space. For a while, neither of them spoke. Sam opened one of his textbooks, scribbling notes in the margins while Aaliyah returned to her book. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, a rare break from the chaos of the school day. Finally, Sam broke the quiet. "I've seen what's been happening," he said, glancing sideways at her. "With Derek, I mean." Aaliyah stiffened, her fingers tightening around the edge of her book. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "You don't have to pretend," Sam replied. "I've seen him messing with you. It's not okay." Her defenses went up instantly. "It's fine," she muttered, avoiding his gaze. "I can handle it." Sam sighed, closing his textbook. "Look, I'm not trying to pry or anything, but, well, I used to be where you are now. Back when I was a freshman, some of the older kids used to pick on me all the time. I know how isolating it feels, like no one cares or notices, so I just wanted to say, you're not alone." For the first time in weeks, Aaliyah felt a flicker of hope. She studied Sam's face, searching for sincerity. His expression was kind, his brown eyes warm and understanding. Slowly, she nodded. "Thanks," she murmured. "That means a lot." Over the next few days, Sam made a point to check in with Aaliyah whenever their paths crossed. Sometimes, it was just a quick hello in the hallway. Other times, they'd share a brief conversation during lunch. Gradually, Aaliyah began opening up to him, sharing bits and pieces of her experience. She told him about the comments, the stares, the way Derek seemed determined to make her life miserable. To her relief, Sam listened without judgment, offering advice when she asked for it. One afternoon, as they sat together in the library, Sam leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We need to do something," he said firmly. "Ignoring him isn't working. We have to stand up to him." Aaliyah frowned. "What do you mean? How?" "I have an idea," Sam explained, "but it'll take some guts and trust. Are you willing to try?" She hesitated, weighing the risks. Standing up to Derek directly seemed dangerous, but doing nothing felt equally unbearable. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Tell me your plan." Sam grinned, his enthusiasm infectious. "First, we document everything. Every time he says something, every time he does something, we record it. My phone has a great camera, and I can catch him without him noticing. Once we have enough evidence, we take it to the principal. They can't ignore proof like that." Aaliyah's heart raced at the thought. It was risky, yes, but it also felt empowering. For the first time since arriving at Maplewood High, she had a plan, a real chance to fight back. "All right," she said, determination creeping into her voice. "Let's do it." And so their partnership began. Over the next week, Sam discreet Keith. The days following Derek's visit to the principal's office felt like a turning point at Maplewood High. While Mrs. Peterson hadn't publicly announced any decisions yet, the ripple effects of Sam and Aaliyah's actions were undeniable. Whispers filled the hallways as students speculated about what might happen next. Some praised Sam for standing up to Derek, while others debated whether anything would actually change. But one thing was certain. The school's usual rhythm had shifted. For Aaliyah, life began to feel a little lighter. She still encountered sideways glances and occasional snickers, but they no longer carried the same sting. Knowing that she wasn't alone, that someone like Sam believed in her, gave her a newfound sense of strength. It wasn't just his support, it was also the knowledge that she'd taken control of her situation. For once, she didn't feel like a victim. Instead, she started seeing herself as someone who could rise above adversity. One afternoon, during art class, Aaliyah found herself sketching a bold design inspired by her braids. Her teacher, Ms. Harper, noticed and complimented her work. "That's incredible," Ms. Harper said, leaning over to examine the intricate patterns. "Have you ever thought about joining the debate team? Your creativity and confidence would make you a great speaker." Aaliyah hesitated. Public speaking had never been her strong suit, and the idea of standing in front of an audience terrified her. But something about Ms. Harper's encouragement planted a seed in her mind. Maybe it was time to step out of her comfort zone, to show everyone, including herself, that she was more than the girl who got bullied. When she mentioned the idea to Sam later that day, he lit up with excitement. "That's amazing," he exclaimed. "You'd crush it. Plus, it's a great way to meet people who share your interests." With his encouragement, Aaliyah decided to give it a try. She signed up for the team, attending her first meeting later that week. To her surprise, she discovered a group of students who welcomed her warmly, eager to hear her thoughts on current events and social issues. Slowly but surely, Aaliyah began forming friendships outside of Sam, expanding her circle in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Meanwhile, Derek's world was unraveling. After being called into the principal's office, he learned that the evidence against him was overwhelming. Mrs. Peterson informed him that he was suspended for 2 weeks, effective immediately. Additionally, he was required to attend counseling sessions focused on empathy and conflict resolution. The news hit him hard, not because he cared about the suspension itself, but because of how it made him look in front of his peers. For years, Derek had built his reputation on fear and intimidation. Now, thanks to Sam and Aaliyah, that image was crumbling. At first, Derek lashed out. He blamed everyone else for his predicament, insisting that Aaliyah and Sam had exaggerated the situation and that the school was unfairly targeting him. His friends listened politely at first, but as the days went on, their patience wore thin. They grew tired of his excuses and constant negativity. Even his closest buddies started distancing themselves, leaving Derek increasingly isolated. It wasn't until the second week of his suspension that Derek began to reflect. Sitting alone in his room, scrolling through old photos on his phone, he realized how much things had changed since middle school. Back then, he'd been the new kid too, the awkward, scrawny boy who struggled to fit in. Kids teased him mercilessly, calling him names and making fun of his clothes. At the time, he promised himself he'd never let anyone treat him that way again. Over the years, he transformed into someone who towered over others, not just physically, but emotionally. He became the bully instead of the bullied. But now, staring at his reflection in the mirror, Derek saw something different. He saw a version of himself he barely recognized, a person so consumed with proving his dominance that he forgot how it felt to be vulnerable. Was this really who he wanted to be? Determined to turn things around, Derek returned to school after his suspension, with a plan. He didn't expect forgiveness or instant redemption, but he knew he needed to start somewhere. During lunch one day, he spotted Aaliyah sitting with her debate teammates. Taking a deep breath, he approached her table cautiously. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Aaliyah looked up, surprised. She glanced at her friends, unsure what to do. Sensing her hesitation, Derek added quickly, "I know I don't deserve it, but I want to apologize. What I did was wrong, and I'm sorry." The sincerity in his tone caught her off guard. Part of her wanted to dismiss him outright, to tell him he wasn't worth her time. But another part, a bigger part, recognized the effort it must have taken for him to say those words. After a moment, she nodded. "Okay," she said simply. They stepped aside, finding a quiet corner where they could speak privately. Derek explained how reflecting on his past helped him understand why he acted the way he did. He admitted that he'd used bullying as a shield, afraid of appearing weak. I don't expect you to trust me, he concluded. But I hope someday you can believe that I'm trying to change. Aaliyah listened silently, processing his words. When he finished, she met his gaze steadily. Thank you for apologizing, she said. That means something. But actions matter more than words. If you're serious about changing, prove it. Derek nodded, gratitude flickering in his eyes. I will, he promised. And though Aaliyah remained cautious, she couldn't deny the sincerity in his voice. As word spread about Derek's apology, opinions among students were divided. Some dismissed it as a PR stunt, convinced he was only pretending to care. Others admired his willingness to admit fault and attempt to make amends. Regardless of what people thought, Derek kept his promise. He joined community service projects, organized by the school, volunteering at local shelters and food banks. Though it wasn't easy, especially when former victims gave him icy stares, he persevered, determined to rebuild his reputation. Back in the classroom, Sam watched these developments with quiet pride. He hadn't sought recognition for his role in exposing Derek's behavior, but his classmates nominated him for a leadership award anyway. When the announcement came during assembly, Sam walked onto the stage to polite applause. Holding the microphone, he dedicated the award to Aaliyah and anyone else who'd ever felt silenced. This isn't just about me, he said, his voice steady. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. None of us are perfect, but we all have the power to choose kindness over cruelty. Let's remember that moving forward. His speech earned a standing ovation, cementing his status as an unlikely hero. For Aaliyah, watching Sam accept the award was bittersweet. She felt immense gratitude for everything he'd done, but she also realized how far she'd come since her first day at Maplewood High. She wasn't the same timid girl who'd walked into that building months ago. She was stronger, braver, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Though tensions lingered, the school slowly began to heal. Conversations about bullying and inclusivity became more common, sparked by the events surrounding Aaliyah, Sam, and Derek. Students started paying closer attention to their own actions, questioning whether they were contributing to a culture of kindness or cruelty. Teachers incorporated lessons on empathy and respect into their curriculums, encouraging open dialogue about difficult topics. By spring, Maplewood High felt like a different place. Friendships formed across cliques, and acts of kindness replaced pranks and insults. Aaliyah thrived on the debate team, earning praise for her eloquence and passion. Sam continued excelling academically, inspiring younger students to pursue their dreams without fear. And Derek, though still working to regain trust, showed genuine progress in becoming a better version of himself. Though scars remained, both visible and invisible, they served as reminders of resilience and growth. Together, Aaliyah and Sam proved that even in the darkest moments, courage and compassion could light the way forward. Their story wasn't just about standing up to a bully. It was about creating a community where everyone belonged. As the school year drew to a close, Maplewood High buzzed with excitement for the annual end-of-year assembly. The event was always a highlight, filled with speeches, awards, and performances that celebrated students' achievements over the past months. This year, however, there was an added layer of anticipation in the air. Everyone knew something significant had shifted within the school's culture, thanks in large part to Aaliyah, Sam, and even Derek's unexpected journey toward change. When the day finally arrived, students filed into the auditorium, chattering animatedly as they took their seats. Balloons adorned the stage and colorful banners hung from the ceiling, each one bearing motivational quotes about growth, courage, and unity. Aaliyah sat near the front with her debate teammates, feeling both nervous and proud. She hadn't planned to speak at the assembly. She wasn't scheduled to, but when Mrs. Peterson approached her earlier that week with the idea, she couldn't say no. After everything she'd been through, she wanted to share her story, not just for herself but for anyone else who might feel invisible or unheard. As the principal introduced various award winners and student leaders, Aaliyah's heart raced. Finally, it was her turn, When Mrs. Peterson called her name, she stood up hesitantly, clutching a small index card with notes scribbled on it. Walking to the podium, she scanned the sea of faces before her. Some smiled encouragingly, while others looked curious, waiting to hear what she would say. "Hi, everyone," Aaliyah began, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm not used to speaking in front of such a big crowd, so bear with me." A ripple of laughter spread through the audience, easing some of her nerves. Taking a deep breath, she continued. "When I first came to Maplewood High this year, I didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe I'd blend in, make friends easily, and settle into my classes without any problems. But things didn't go exactly as I'd hoped." She paused, glancing down at her notes before looking back up. "Some of you may know or have heard about what happened to me. It wasn't easy being singled out, mocked, and made to feel like I didn't belong. For a long time I felt powerless, like nothing I did mattered. But then something changed. Someone stood up for me when I needed it most." Aaliyah turned toward Sam, who sat a few rows away, giving him a grateful nod. "Sam showed me that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength. He reminded me that we all have the power to make a difference, even if it feels scary or impossible. And because of his courage, and the support of my teachers, family, and new friends, I found my own voice again." Her words resonated deeply with the audience. Many students nodded in agreement, while others exchanged thoughtful glances. Aaliyah went on to talk about the importance of standing up for one another, of creating a school where everyone felt safe and valued. "No one should have to face bullying alone," she said firmly. "We can choose to look away, or we can choose to act. We can tear each other down, or we can lift each other up. I believe in us, in our ability to be better together." By the time she finished, the entire auditorium erupted into applause. Students rose to their feet, cheering loudly as Aaliyah stepped back from the podium, her cheeks flushed but her spirit soaring. She'd done it. She'd spoken her truth, and it had touched people in ways she never imagined. After the assembly, life at Maplewood High continued to evolve. Conversations sparked by Aaliyah's speech carried over into classrooms and hallways. Teachers noticed a shift in how students interacted with one another, with more acts of kindness and fewer instances of exclusion. Even small gestures like holding the door open for someone or offering a smile became more common, proving that change often starts with simple actions. Derek's efforts to rebuild trust also gained traction. Though he still faced skepticism from some peers, his commitment to volunteering and helping others began to soften hearts. During a community cleanup project, he teamed up with Aaliyah and several other students to paint murals around town. At first, the group worked in awkward silence, unsure how to bridge the gap between them. But as the hours passed, laughter replaced tension, and conversations flowed naturally. By the end of the day, Derek found himself included in group photos, his smile genuine for the first time in years. For Sam, recognition kept coming in unexpected ways. In addition to the Leadership Award, he was invited to present his latest science project at a regional competition. His innovative design for a solar-powered water filtration system earned him second place, further solidifying his reputation as a brilliant thinker. Yet despite the accolades, Sam remained humble, always quick to credit teamwork and collaboration for his success. "None of us achieve anything alone," he'd say whenever praised. "It's the people around us who truly matter." Aaliyah, meanwhile, blossomed in ways she never anticipated. Her confidence grew with every debate tournament, earning her top marks and admiration from teammates. Beyond academics, she became a role model for younger students, often mentoring freshmen struggling to adjust to high school life. Her braids, once a target for ridicule, became symbols of pride and identity, not just for her but for others inspired by her resilience. On the last day of school, Aaliyah and Sam walked across campus together, reminiscing about the year's highs and lows. The sun shone brightly overhead, casting golden light over the familiar buildings they'd come to love. "Can you believe it's almost over?" Sam asked, shielding his eyes from the glare. "I know," Aaliyah replied, smiling wistfully. "It feels like just yesterday I was walking into homeroom for the first time, scared out of my mind." "You've come so far since then," Sam said, nudging her playfully. Remember that dodgeball game? You were unstoppable. Aaliyah laughed, shaking her head. Unstoppable? More like terrified. But yeah, I guess I did survive. They stopped near the benches outside the cafeteria, where they'd shared so many quiet moments throughout the year. For a while, neither spoke, simply enjoying the peacefulness of the moment. Finally, Aaliyah broke the silence. Do you think things will stay like this? Like, will people keep treating each other better? Sam shrugged, thoughtful. I think we've planted seeds. Change doesn't happen overnight, but I believe we've made a real impact, and if enough of us keep choosing kindness, it'll stick. Aaliyah nodded, feeling hopeful. Yeah, that's all we can do. Keep trying. As they parted ways later, that afternoon, promising to stay in touch over the summer, Aaliyah reflected on everything she'd learned. High school wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it had taught her valuable lessons about resilience, friendship, and the power of standing up for what's right. She'd entered Maplewood High as a quiet newcomer, unsure of her place in the world. Now she left as someone who'd faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger because of it. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, Aaliyah knew she wouldn't face them alone. With friends like Sam by her side and a newfound belief in herself, she was ready to take on whatever came next. After all, every ending was just the beginning of something new.